My name is Scott Keeney, and it was over 50 years ago that I met Chris. It was the first day of kindergarten. It was September 1970. Mrs. McLean's Clyde Hill kindergarten class. And Chris was wearing a sweater vest knit by his mom. That's what I remember. Chris had a better memory than me. And just recently he relayed the story about his recollection of that day. And apparently he came home and proclaimed to his mother that, "Hey Mom, I just met a new best friend at kindergarten." And so a few days later, I went home with Chris. We pulled out his Meccano set. It's like a Rector set. And we started one of the first of many, many projects and many special memories. I'm extremely grateful for our friendship over the years, for the half century of friendship. It's been hard to make sense of this, and I knew it would be tough. But there's at least three areas where I have found profound meaning, and I want to share those with you today. The first area where I found profound meaning is all the work we did together on just a wide range of projects. From building Meccano at age 7 to, at age 57, building a crazy boat in my garage during the pandemic. We kind of never grew up, I think. And we shared this lifelong passion to design and just build stuff. When we were young, it was model trains and planes and boats. And later, it was sort of full-scale stuff. We built racing sailboats, furniture, scooters, cars, house projects. And, growing up, we essentially lived in the Middleton's basement and garage. Both his parents were incredibly encouraging. I think their garage was perpetually displaced by projects that we were working on. In addition, it was the tea breaks in those projects that I'll never forget. Mrs. Middleton, sorry, Gerda to you, Mrs. Middleton to me, her homemade bread, marmalade, jam, homemade yogurt, and fresh vegetables from the garden. I'll never forget that. And as Otto said, she was a really special person and did all these projects while she was working as a nurse. She means a lot to me. So Chris and I went to school together from kindergarten all the way through to University of Washington. It's kind of a rare period of time. And while we were growing up, we were often bored in school, and so we would often go to the Bellevue Public Library to just get inspired to do stuff and get information to do stuff. And I'd like to tell you a story about just one project we did, which is our infamous land sailor. So one of the books that Chris and I love to sail, and one of the books that we found was this really old book that described how a hydrofoil sailboat could, at least in theory, sail faster than the wind. That was a really cool concept, I think. Isn't it cool? To sail faster than the wind. So Chris and I tried to do this with our sailboats and built models and full-scale versions of hydrofoil sailboats. Never quite worked. Fortunately, the Coast Guard rescued us one time when one of our boats sank. But we thought, well, if that won't work, let's do it in a wheeled version. And so with Kev Fascholz, we built this land sailor. And we didn't just build a little land sailor, it was this behemoth thing. It never quite worked in the neighborhood, but we thought, well, if we take it to Ocean Shores, it's got to work. So we took it to Ocean Shores, slept in Kev's truck for the night, poured down rain, and the next day we went out and got it going. And for 20 seconds of exhilaration, we sailed faster than the wind. And then we hit a wet bit of sand. It spun out and it catastrophically crashed. And fortunately, there were no broken bones. And just this past spring, I called Chris. I think he was at the Hutch one day, and I was down in San Francisco. And I happened to be out at San Francisco Bay with my family, and we were watching the America's Cup boats sail 70 miles an hour. And it was just a great time to experience that and then share that over the phone with Chris about our ongoing dream to sail past the lane on our boats. So there are countless other projects, and Chris and I had a really nice time over the last 6 months recollecting these stories. And one of the last conversations we had, we talked about how we were a bit dilettantish in our set of projects that we did. We never spent the sort of requisite 10,000 hours to get really good at anything. But when I got off the phone, it struck me that it was the integrated hours over those 5 decades that was truly special. It was our friendship that we built that was, I think, truly remarkable. And this brings me to my second theme, which is friendship. And it's not only our friendship, as I look out today, it's just extraordinary to see this community of great friends. Chris had many best friends. He was incredible in his ability to build friendships. And I think it's this community that is and will remain truly remarkable. And it was one of the things that many of us have reflected on about Chris that was really special about his character. He was amiable. He seldom had a bad thing to say about anybody. And he truly cared about bringing disparate groups of people together. Even from his hospice bed, Chris had a vision of 2 of his friends that lived in different cities that never met each other. He wanted them to meet, and hopefully that happens. It was this remarkable desire to bring people together that I think was one of his truly distinctive virtues that means a lot to me. But in saying this, I also don't want to provide this sort of simplistic caricature of Chris. He was quirky also, and he often sort of bristled at societal conventions. And it's good to see, for those that you can see later, his flip phone, I think, is in the hall. So, as most of you know, Chris would never use a smartphone. Less well known occurred here in St. Thomas when Chris was given a flowered wedding tie at my wedding. He surprised Janet by wearing his tie skinny side out. And I think it's something that we fondly remember. And this brings me to my final theme, and that is love. So I suppose just to set the stage, as you can imagine, boys in high school who are building land sailors probably aren't in the most popular group and going on a lot of dates. That was us. But at the end of high school, I was extremely fortunate, and a girl asked me out on a date, and Chris was right at my side. I was incredibly anxious, and he encouraged me, and it was a girl that we both thought was really cool. She was pretty, she was nice. She also liked really good music, and so subsequently, Chris was my wingman on many dates, the 3 of us going out to sing bands. I'll never forget, the 3 of us saw U2 together in 1984. And Chris was at my side later at our wedding, and also at my side when Janet battled breast cancer 3 times. He was just always there. And so later, I appreciated the opportunity to support Chris when he met Deirdre. He was clearly chuffed. I think it's a British term, right? I don't know. He was, we all saw just profound changes in Chris at that time. And I'll never forget the night we were at Kev's Hood Canal Cabin, where we often went, made pizza, drank Tom's wine. And then when we retired, Chris and I would always sleep in the upstairs room where there's these twin kiddie beds where we always stayed. And that night we stayed up very late, and Chris, sort of proclaimed his great love for Deirdre, and I just felt honored to that he was sharing that. And I'd like to think that I played a small role. in encouraging him. And you know, he was anxious at that time about the convention of marriage and whatnot. And I told him to press on and get on with it, and he did. And it's been just a great joy for me to see their love develop over the years. And I love the sentence in the obituary that one can't imagine a more happily proclaimed love story. I think that really hits it. So, to conclude, in these past 6 months, and many conversations we've had, you know, Chris never described his battle with pancreatic cancer as his misfortune. Instead, he focused on the areas in life where he felt extraordinarily fortunate. In you know, all of the interesting projects that he had been able to do, to have had a rich, diverse, and deep set of friends, and most important, to have a deep love for Deirdre, his family, and especially for Pelly and Henry. He loved you too. I'm honored to be here today. I'm deeply grateful for my friendship with Chris and this truly special community that surrounded him. Indeed, this community has given me hope as I've struggled with grief. It's a community that Chris built. And over the last 6 months, I've seen existing relationships become profoundly deeper, seen new relationships form. And as we go forth today, it is my hope that this community will continue to develop, and in doing so, honor our friend Chris. Chris is still ahead of me, and now he's sailing faster than the wind. Thanks.